Imagine uncovering a horrifying family secret, one so devastating it pushes a preacher to commit an unspeakable act, castrating his own father in a fit of righteous fury. In a single moment, everything he believed in, faith, family, and legacy, comes crashing down. This is the tragic story of a man whose life was built on trust and scripture, until a brutal betrayal turned his world inside out. Before we delve into this chilling tale, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories from the darkest corners of human nature. Pastor Marcus Delaney, 42, was the moral cornerstone of his community in Florida, known for his impassioned sermons and unwavering stance on family values. Marcus led a thriving ministry that attracted hundreds. To many, he wasn't just a preacher. He was the embodiment of everything righteous. His church flock revered him, his neighbors respected him, and his family adored him. By his side was Rachel Delaney, 38, a graceful, composed woman who wore many hats: preacher's wife, devoted mother of 5, and active community leader. She organized Sunday school programs, hosted charity events, and stood beside Marcus through every challenge. Together, they seemed like the perfect couple, raising their children: Madison, 16, Marcus Jr., 14, Jordan, 12, Ava, 9, and Logan, 6, in a home built on discipline, love, and devotion. At the heart of this close-knit family was Deacon Thomas Delaney, Marcus's father. At 65, Thomas was a respected elder and a spiritual guide for the church. He had been a deacon for decades, instilling in Marcus a deep reverence for Scripture and unwavering moral principles. Marcus often spoke of his father during sermons, calling him the rock of their family. The Delaney household overflowed with life and laughter. Madison, the eldest, was thoughtful and academic, often volunteering with the church's youth ministry. Marcus Jr. was reserved but reliable. Jordan, the curious middle child, was the spark of mischief. Ava's sweetness won hearts, while Logan, the baby, brought joy and innocence to their daily lives. Sunday dinners at Thomas's house were sacred. They began with scripture readings and heartfelt prayers, followed by vibrant conversations about faith and family. For Marcus, these gatherings were a proud reflection of the strength of their spiritual bond. One Sunday evening, over a hearty meal at the long oak dining table, 16-year-old Madison shared an idea. "For my genealogy project," she said brightly, "I thought we could all take DNA tests. It could be fun to see where we come from. Maybe we'll find out we're royalty." Her siblings buzzed with excitement, offering their own theories on mysterious ancestors and lost family secrets. Marcus smiled. "That's a great idea, Maddie. Something we can all do together." But across the table, Rachel's expression darkened. She reached for her water, her hand trembling slightly. "I don't know, Maddie," she said, voice soft but uneasy. "Those tests can be invasive. Not everything needs to be uncovered." Her words hung in the air. She glanced at Thomas, who sat at the head of the table, his face unmoved. "Come on, Rachel," Marcus said, brushing off her concern with a chuckle. "What's the harm? It's just a fun family activity, and it'll help Madison's project. We've got nothing to hide." He reached across the table, gently placing a hand over hers. Rachel hesitated. Her eyes met his, unreadable, and then slowly she nodded. "All right," she said quietly. But deep down, she already knew the truth. And soon, so would everyone else. The room was filled with laughter and excitement as the children huddled around Marcus, who was holding his phone just above the table. With a grin, he completed the order for the DNA test kits. A small cheer erupted from the kids. Thomas, sitting silently nearby, offered a tight smile and took a slow sip of his coffee. He said nothing. Weeks later, the results arrived. Madison was the first to notice and quickly called everyone to gather around the computer. Marcus logged into the genealogy website as his children buzzed with excitement. They scrolled through colorful maps, ancestral reports, and discovered distant relatives they never knew existed. The room hummed with joy until Marcus's brow furrowed. "Wait a minute," he muttered, leaning closer to the screen. "This says I'm not a genetic match to any of the kids." Not one. He gave a nervous laugh and shook his head. That's got to be a mistake. Some kind of database glitch. Across the room, Rachel froze. Her hand gripped the edge of the chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. Thomas glanced at Marcus, his face unreadable, but his jaw clenched ever so slightly. "I'll call the company," Marcus said, trying to sound calm. "They probably just mixed up the samples." He stood, kissed Rachel on the head, and added, "Don't worry, I'll get this sorted." Over the next several days, Marcus exchanged emails and phone calls with the testing company. He described the issue in full, confident that someone, somewhere, had simply made a clerical error. But the response he finally received struck him like a thunderclap. "We've triple-checked the results," the representative said over the phone. "There's no error. You are not the biological father of any of the children. But we did find a genetic match. Another close relative submitted a sample." Marcus's world tilted. He asked for confirmation, clinging to hope that it was a fluke. But the answer remained the same. He hung up in stunned silence. Only one other relative had submitted a sample, his father, Thomas. His mind spiraled. Subtle memories surfaced, the frequent visits, Rachel's tense demeanor whenever Thomas was around, and her initial resistance to the DNA idea. All the puzzle pieces began to snap into place, and the picture they formed was monstrous. That evening, Marcus returned home, a folded stack of printed DNA reports clenched in his fist. Rachel was in the living room, folding laundry. He tossed the papers onto the table. "Explain this," he said, his voice low and razor-sharp. Rachel's eyes darted to the pages, then to Marcus's face. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The DNA results," he snapped. "They say I'm not the biological father of my own children. But there's a match, another man in the family. You want to tell me what the hell is going on?" Rachel's skin went pale. She grasped the back of a chair for balance. "There must be a mistake," she whispered. "That can't be right. Don't lie to me, Rachel." Marcus exploded. "I called the company. I verified it. No mistake. So I'll ask you one more time. Explain." "This." Rachel crumbled. Her knees buckled as she sank into the chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Through broken sobs, she confessed a nightmare Marcus never could have imagined. Years ago, early in their marriage, Thomas had coerced her into a sexual relationship. His authority, influence, and control made her feel powerless. The abuse continued for years, until eventually, all 5 of her children were fathered by Thomas, not Marcus. "All 5, she whispered, tears pouring down her cheeks. "They're all his. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't want to destroy you." Marcus stumbled back, the room spinning around him. The woman he loved, the father he worshipped. Together, they had betrayed him in a way that defied comprehension. He stormed out of the house, his chest heaving with anguish. Rage, grief, disbelief, each emotion clawed at him in waves. That night, Marcus sat alone in his car, parked under the empty sky. Rachel's confession replayed in his mind like a broken record. His faith, his marriage, his family, all of it had been built on a lie. The children he had raised with pride weren't his. The man who had shaped his spiritual path was a predator. The woman he had vowed to protect had been suffering in silence. Shock, pain, and then something darker. And Marcus Delaney was no longer the man he had once been. Disbelief gave way to rage, so blinding it stole his breath. Marcus gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned bone white, tears streaming down his face as he screamed into the empty car. Why? How could they do this to me? He slammed his fists against the dashboard, the violent thud echoing in the silence. The pain, the betrayal, it boiled over into raw frustration. Without direction or destination, he drove through the sleeping streets of his quiet Florida town, headlights cutting through the stillness of the night. Memories flashed before him like ghosts. Family dinners, joyful sermons, bedtime stories, and the warmth of a life he thought was sacred. But now, all of it was soaked in deception. Every thought led back to a lie. By the time dawn broke, Marcus found himself parked beside a still, secluded lake. The water was glassy, unmoved, eerily calm. In that silence, something inside him shifted. The pain remained, but it hardened. It calcified into something darker. Vengeance. The betrayal was too deep to forgive. The wound, too, infected a heal. In his mind, only one path remained: justice. But not the kind preached from pulpits. This justice would be delivered by his own hand. His father and his wife had ruined everything he believed in, and now they would pay. He sat by the lake for hours planning. It came with unsettling clarity. For years, Marcus had spoken of grace and compassion, of mercy and redemption. But now his heart was hollow. The sermons meant nothing. Each time Rachel's voice echoed in his memory, her sobbing confession, it reignited the fire. When Marcus returned home that evening, he was unervingly calm. Rachel, still upstairs, had spent the night crying in the bedroom. He didn't speak to her. He couldn't. Looking at his children made his stomach twist. They weren't his, not by blood, but he still loved them deeply. That love only fueled the inferno inside. The house was heavy with silence. Rachel sat alone in the dimly lit living room, her face pale and streaked with tears. She had been waiting, dreading the moment she knew would come. Marcus entered the room without a word. His eyes were hollow. A kitchen knife, cold and steel-sharp, was hidden in his hand. Rachel looked up slowly, her voice barely audible. "Marcus," she said, trembling. "I know you're hurting, but we can—" "Don't," he cut her off coldly. "Don't you dare try to fix this with words. You destroyed everything, Rachel. Everything." She rose shakily to her feet, wringing her hands, her voice cracking. "I was trapped. I didn't know how to stop it. I never wanted to hurt you." Marcus's laugh was bitter and sharp. "Didn't want to hurt me? You let him violate our marriage. You bore his children and sat across from me every night like everything was normal. You lied to me every single day." Rachel dropped to her knees, sobbing. "Please, Marcus. I love you. We can fix this." "Fix this?" he roared. "This can't be fixed." Without hesitation, he lunged forward, plunging the knife into her chest. Rachel gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. Blood stained her blouse as she fell backward. Marcus, his face void of mercy, pulled the blade free and struck again, this time in her stomach. Sickening sounds of tearing flesh filled the room, her screams echoing off the walls. Rachel tried to crawl away, leaving a trail of blood in her wake. But Marcus was relentless. Each stab was a release, each cut a scream of betrayal finally set free. "You should have told me the truth," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You should have stopped him." When Rachel's body finally went limp, slumped in a crimson pool on the carpet, Marcus stood over her, panting, the knife dripping in his hand. The rage didn't subside. It simply changed direction. There was one more soul who needed to answer for what had been done. Marcus drove through the night, the wheels of his car humming against the pavement. The air was thick and still. His thoughts were poison, his mind filled with the image of Rachel's lifeless body. Justice hadn't yet been served. Not fully. He had nothing left to lose. He pulled up to Thomas's house and stepped out. The porch light flickered as he approached. Without knocking, Marcus burst through the door. Inside, Thomas sat calmly at the dining table, a cup of tea in one hand, his Bible open in front of him. He looked up, startled. "Marcus?" he asked, his voice uncertain. "What are you doing here?" Marcus stepped into the room, his eyes filled with something Thomas had never seen in his son before. Something final. Thomas looked up, his voice tinged with confusion and the first flicker of fear. "Marcus?" he asked, rising slowly from his chair. Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward and slammed a crumpled sheet of paper onto the table. The DNA results. His voice was low, simmering with barely contained fury. "Explain this." Thomas's eyes dropped to the paper, then darted back to his son. I don't know what this is," he stammered, his voice faltering. "Don't you dare lie to me." Marcus snapped, his hands trembling with rage. "You've been violating Rachel for years, haven't you? You father my children." Thomas raised his hands, trying to calm his son. "Marcus, please, listen to me. It's not what you think. Don't lie." Marcus roared, his voice shaking the room. "You destroyed my family. You're a monster." Before Thomas could respond, Marcus lunged. The knife in his hand plunged into Thomas's side with brutal force. Thomas cried out, stumbling backward, clutching the wound as blood spread across his shirt. But Marcus wasn't finished. With savage precision, he stabbed again and again. Years of betrayal, humiliation, and rage fueled every thrust. Thomas collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, writhing in pain. His strength was slipping away, and the blood loss was rapid. "You deserve to feel every ounce of pain you caused me," Marcus growled, standing over his father. Thomas tried to crawl away, each breath shallow and desperate, but his body failed him. Marcus knelt beside him, his voice now cold and controlled. "This is for Rachel. This is for the years of lies. This is for my children." With one final, horrific act, Marcus gripped the knife tightly and began cutting off his father's manhood. Thomas's screams of agony filled the room, raw, primal, and gut-wrenching. His body convulsed, blood pooling beneath him. Marcus's face was emotionless, his focus chillingly unwavering. The pain proved too much. Thomas's cries faded, his body trembling until it finally went still. He exhaled one last ragged breath, and then silence. Marcus released the knife, now slick with blood, and stumbled backward. His chest heaved as he stood in the aftermath of the carnage. The air reeked of iron and death. For a moment, he just stared at the lifeless body of the man he had once honored and loved. But there was no peace, no sense of relief, only a deep, echoing emptiness where his faith, his family, and his purpose had once lived. Covered in blood, Marcus walked out of the house. He sat down on the front porch, the morning sun casting long shadows over the quiet neighborhood. That peace shattered minutes later when police arrived, responding to frantic calls from neighbors who had heard the screaming. Officers approached cautiously, weapons drawn, expecting a dangerous standoff. Instead, they found Marcus seated calmly, blood-soaked, with his Bible resting in his lap. He looked up, meeting their eyes. "It's done," he said quietly, raising his hands in surrender. "God's justice has been served." The officers moved in quickly, handcuffing him while exchanging uneasy glances. One officer entered the house and emerged moments later, pale and shaken. Inside was a scene of unspeakable horror. Thomas's body, savagely mutilated, chest riddled with stab wounds, and his genitals severed. As Marcus was placed into the back of the patrol car, he turned to one of the officers, his voice disturbingly steady. "Rachel," he said, "you'll find her at our house. She betrayed me too." The officers exchanged shocked looks. Within minutes, a team rushed to Marcus's home, and what they found only deepened the nightmare. Rachel's dismembered body lay in the living room, blood staining the furniture and floor. Her remains were arranged in a grotesque display of rage and calculated vengeance. Back at the station, Marcus gave a full confession. His tone was eerily flat, his eyes void of emotion. "She lied to me for years," he said of Rachel. "And my father, he ruined everything." There was no remorse, only the hollow voice of a man who believed he had delivered divine judgment, one horrific act at a time. I believe they had to face the consequences. Marcus Delaney's chillingly calm confession left investigators stunned. When questioned further about the brutal murders, his response was hauntingly simple. "They destroyed our family. I just finished what they started." The twin crime scenes, the vicious killing of his wife Rachel and the savage mutilation of his father Thomas, sent shockwaves throughout the quiet Florida community. Once hailed as a spiritual leader and moral compass, Pastor Marcus Delaney had transformed into a symbol of terror. His descent left a devastating legacy of violence, betrayal, and shattered faith. News of the case quickly spread beyond the state, and Marcus's trial drew national attention. The courtroom became a stage for one of the most horrifying and sensational true crime stories in recent memory. Journalists, true crime enthusiasts, and members of his former congregation filled every available seat, all desperate to witness how the justice system would respond to a preacher turned killer. Marcus's defense argued that he had been driven to madness by unimaginable betrayal. They called on mental health professionals to testify about the trauma he endured, learning that his 5 children were not biologically his, but the result of years of sexual abuse committed by his own father against his wife, Rachel. They described Marcus as a man who had been pushed far beyond the limits of human endurance, mentally and emotionally crushed by a web of lies. The prosecution, however, focused on the premeditated nature of the killings. They emphasized the brutality of the crimes, especially the gruesome mutilation of Thomas Delaney, and argued that no betrayal, however terrible, could excuse such calculated and horrific violence. Marcus's actions, they said, were not those of a man in a moment of blind rage, but of someone who deliberately planned and executed his vengeance. After several days of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict, guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. The judge, acknowledging the emotional complexity of the case, but bound by the law, sentenced Marcus Delaney to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The consequences didn't stop there. Marcus's 5 children, now orphans, were separated and placed in foster care. Each one faced the impossible task of processing the horrifying truths about their origins and the family they once believed was built on faith and love. The Delaney family, once admired and held up as a model of spiritual strength, became a cautionary tale, an unforgettable reminder of how hidden secrets and betrayal can tear even the most devout lives apart. As Marcus was led out of the courtroom in shackles, he clutched his Bible tightly, whispering prayers to a God he still believed had guided his actions. To the public, he became a tragic symbol of what can happen when trust is destroyed and pain turns into vengeance. Was Marcus Delaney a broken man pushed too far, or did he commit acts no amount of betrayal could justify? If this story left you questioning the line between justice and revenge, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime cases that reveal the darkest corners of a human soul.